Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for this town hall meeting. This is unique in many different ways. First, of course, this is a combined visit for both the UNO and UNMC campuses together. And to the best of my knowledge, it's the first time that we've hosted a combined town hall meeting, as we've done every month separately for the last years, far back as I can remember. It's also unique in that I'm speaking to you from the Davis Global Center Holographic Theater, which is an amazing facility here on the Med Center campus, which is slowly in the phase of becoming operational and will continue to be increasingly so over the next weeks and months to come. It's also historic that I have a group of colleagues that I'm joined with, including Mr. Ewald, Dr. Kopp, Dr. Davies, and of course Dr. Kratochvil, as well as several others who are standing in front of me. Dr. Shipp is with me, and several others from our media team. I'd like to use this time as productively as possible, and although we will take questions on any and every subject, I'd like to spend most of our time today talking all things virus, specifically to talk about what we know, what the facts are, where the university is, where our campuses are, and then to give the audience the opportunity to call in, write in with questions, and we've shared the ways that we're going to take those questions, and we hope to have an opportunity over the next hour to answer as many as possible. So I'm assuming that most of our audience today reads the local newspapers and the national press, watches the news at night and in the mornings, tracks the impact on the financial markets. And so I don't plan to waste your time in boring you with all of that. But I should take just a minute and share some of the data as it is of early this morning. So we are globally up to approximately 246,000 cases of confirmed COVID-ID with just over 10,000 deaths. That's of 7 o'clock this morning Central Time. That would be an increase of 30,000 cases over yesterday. We've been ticking along at about a 20,000 per case increment rate for a very long time, at least for the last week. And that has just changed to 30,000. The United States broke 14,000 cases overnight with 205 known deaths. But I would point out to you that 54 of those 205 deaths occurred within the last 24 hours. And then New York City, as you may know, an area that I track very closely because of my family, is up to 5,700 confirmed cases as of 7 o'clock this morning. And these are Johns Hopkins data web feeds that we rely on, which are updated frequently. I might point out to you also that I looked back at exactly a month ago, the 20th of March, the 20th of February. And at that time, there were a total of 82,000 cases worldwide. And by the way, there were 1,026 outside of the country of China. At that time, there were only 26 countries that had one or more cases. Indeed, last Saturday morning in New York City, there were 541 confirmed cases, which means that they've gone up by a factor of 10 in less than a week. If you add all that together and take into it all the uncertainty of availability of confirmation of testing, access to testing, reporting of testing from other parts of the world, and even if we discount some of the information that's been coming out of China and other parts of the Orient where the data may not be quite so reliable, the information that we're getting from Western Europe, particularly our Italian colleagues, and the data we're getting from France, the data we're getting from Germany, the data we're getting from the United Kingdom, all confirm the modeling that has been distributed and indeed that the Med Center here has been so actively involved with. There's also been a lot of rumor about what are the risk factors for this. Unfortunately, there is no known native immunity to this. We refer to this in epidemiologic terms as a naive, an immunologically naive community, meaning if we don't have antibodies, the chance of spreading the infection and having the infection is extremely high. It is estimated that on average, an individual will spread the infection to about 2.5 people. That is referred to as the R0, or the infection factor. With a doubling time, that is estimated to be between 7 and 10 days currently, although there's information from other cities in the United States and from other countries around the world that the numbers may actually be lower than that. There are no known vaccines. The first vaccine trial for safety actually started earlier this week. And there are no known effective antivirals. There are a number of clinical trials that are ongoing in the United States. Here at the Med Center, we are among the first, if not the first, I believe, to participate in the Remdesivir trial. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But there are other trials around the world with some preliminary information. Unfortunately, there's a ton of information on social media that is grossly inaccurate and potentially dangerous, which actually gets me to one of the most important points that I hope our audience takes away from this, which is only rely on trusted sources of information, because there's an awful lot of non-trusted information that's being widely shared. We are obviously not in a position to be 100% sure of what this looks like on a global level, what it looks like on a national level, what it looks like on a statewide or even local level. However, the projections on a national level vary in a wide range, affectionately known as models A, B, C, and D. And indeed, even in the most conservative models, we're talking at a 20 to 30% population infection rate. Roughly of those, approximately 5%, it's estimated, will need hospitalization. 1 to 2% will need critical care. And we're estimating a case fatality rate, a CFR, of approximately 0.5%. Please know that the World Health Organization reported a 3.4% case fatality rate, but that was based on a somewhat selected sample. That may not be completely accurate, given the fact that we believe that we are underdiagnosing and underconfirming cases by as much as a factor of 20, which means that for every case that's confirmed, there are approximately 20 people who are infected who have either not been tested or are not confirmed at any given time. But if you do the math in a totally unmitigated model, that is to say, without significant intervention, in the absence of vaccine and effective antivirals, we're talking about somewhere in the vicinity of between 500,000 and 600,000 Nebraskans will become infected with this. You do the math on the percentage of those that need hospitalization, which is mostly going to be the older age groups, those with comorbidities of things like diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, other immunologic diseases, being treated for malignancies, etc. That's going to result in a good number of unfortunate fatalities, somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 fatalities, again, totally without mitigation. And so our goal, and the main reason that we're spending all this time together with you this morning, is not only to bring you up to date as to what's going on our campuses, and we're going to go into that in just a few minutes, but to also make sure that you are aware of what are referred to as the NPIs, the non-pharmacologic interventions, the things that we're asking all of you to do just to be sure to protect yourselves, protect our university, protect our students, our faculty, our staff, and of course protect the communities that we deeply love. The NPIs, and you'll probably hear this repeated several times if you haven't already, is I think at the top of the list: if you are ill, stay home. If you have an immediate family member that is ill or you think may be ill, stay home. We have to stop the spread of this. And the information that has come from the health departments and from the governors about small groups, about work, about church, about the K-12 school system is all aimed at exactly the same thing, which of course is why we're sitting 6 feet apart here and we're observing social distancing. But I would point out to you that 10 people in my living room is different than 10 people in Memorial Stadium. And just be cognizant of what that means and why that is important. Secondly, take all of these 6-foot precautions. Use plenty of hand sanitizer. I actually carry my own. I don't know which pocket it's in here. Here it is. This happens to be Maverick hand sanitizer. It's got a healthy dose of Maverick Spirit built into it, and it's incredibly powerful. I will leave that here, and we've got a goodly supply of that, thanks to Dr. Shipp and his team. But use that kind of stuff, often use it frequently, etc. And then, very importantly, besides all the social distancing, the stay home from work, the use of hand sanitizer, things of that nature, and the reliance on accurate health information is, if you think you are ill or if you're concerned about somebody who is ill, the thing to do is not to jump into the car and head to the nearest clinic, urgent care center, or to the nearest hospital emergency room, but to pick up the phone and to get some advice. Because if you don't have the virus, the last thing you want to do is sit in some urgent care center or an emergency room waiting room with 8 other people who do have it, because that's going to certainly result in bad things happening over a period of time. And there are 800 numbers that are available, that are operational 24/7. The CDC website is full of very good and accurate information. The Public Health Office's website is full of good and accurate information. And of course, the Med Center is full of good and accurate information that we have pushed out and continue to push out at a very frequent level. I'll also tell you, as a point of pride, the GCHS, the Global Center for Health Security, which Dr. Kratochvil can comment on this in a few minutes, have had the opportunity to repatriate individuals from Wuhan, China, from the Diamond Princess, and from other parts across the country and around the world in a continuous fashion for purposes of quarantine, for purposes of isolation, and when necessary for biocontainment. It may be useful just to define those terms for a minute. Quarantine is a term, it actually comes from the Italian, which means 40 days. And it was used to say that if you isolated somebody and contained them in privacy for 40 days, you could be sure they didn't have an infection. And it's aimed at people who are not infected, who are not symptomatic, who are just at high risk for developing the disease. Isolation is a term that's used for individuals who have a confirmed infection or a high suspicion of being infected, but are not sick enough to be hospitalized. And finally, biocontainment, which is a form of hospitalization. Think of that as critical care for people who need to be hospitalized. So a full spectrum of quarantine, isolation, and biocontainment that has been actively going on in close partnership with our federal government, almost all of the agencies of the federal government, in close partnership with the White House, in close partnership with the governor, or the mayor of our major cities in Nebraska, our public health officials, etc. It's been an amazing partnership where all of these people come together, work together with a single common purpose of maintaining the health and the security and the wellness of the communities that we serve, and of course supporting the stability of the entire society and the state of Nebraska and the multi-state region that we serve here at the Med Center. It should not be lost on anybody, of course, that a while back, President Carter, in conjunction with the chancellors, issued the beginning of several messages to the community, to the university, saying that, one, we were going to go on a remote education model and use distance education in all of its forms, not just traditional e-learning, but many other types of remote education in order to affect social distancing. We then issued a lot of information about work from home. We issued a good deal of information about support services, and that continues to be issued on almost a daily basis. When we come to conclusions in these areas, we share this information rapidly, and we share it as transparently as possible. And so what I'd like to do is, before taking questions, I'd just like to quickly go across the table and maybe start with Sacha. For those of you that don't know Dr. Kopp, he's the Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at UNO. He's been with us since about, June of last year, Sacha? So it's been quite a rapid transition in many different ways. And maybe you could just give us a very brief update about where we are on the academic side of the equation at UNO. And by the way, Sacha and Dele work very, very closely together. So Sacha, why don't you take a few minutes, then we'll go to Doug, then we'll go to Dele, then we'll go to Chris, and then we'll go to questions. Is that okay, Dan?
Yep. Okay.
Thank you. I see we're starting to get questions online, which is great.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Gold. On the UNO campus, faculty and staff have been working with myself and Vice Chancellor Shipp and Vice Chancellor Ewald for about 2 months now, and thinking ahead to a time where we would be in remote operations mode. Our information technology team has been superb in really preparing a lot of resources for faculty to use and how to re-envision their classes for a remote education model. And those resources have been made available to faculty for some time now on a site called keepteaching.unomaha.edu. And across the campus, the deans and my team have been working very closely at thinking about such issues as who are the personnel that need to be on campus, who are the folks that can be working from home, and how will we ensure consistent delivery of instruction across all of our academic programs. So we've nailed it down to every last program, ensuring our students will graduate on time for May, and all of our students will be able to complete their courses this semester and even into the summer as this situation unfolds. And then Dr. Shipp's team has been very involved in looking at how will we engage our students, everything from online advising, online counseling and mental health, online registrar services, all the kinds of resources the students would normally do by dropping in are now available either over Zoom or other kinds of tools so that students can stay home just as we stay from home. We've also had lots of preparation work for our housing office, and students are able to stay on campus or able to go home. So there's been a lot of preparation for this time, and of course we are using this 2-week break of spring break to make the final switchover so that faculty are ready to start instruction on March 30th.
Super, that's great, Sacha. Thank you. Doug, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'd just like to add that first and foremost, safety and security of our students and all of our workers here are foremost in our minds. Earlier this week, we put out specific guidance with respect to students that are in our housing facilities that, as Dr. Kopp said, they're welcome to stay. If they're uncomfortable or they choose to go home, there will be refunds paid. We're also working on that with respect to some parking operations. We know that students have until March 24th here to check out. So at that point in time, we'll batch everything together and do some refunds for our students. We've also been actively engaged with our child care facilities on both campuses, doing our best to make sure that they're up and running for those critical people that need to continue to work and have some daycare facilities available, and as well as potential for repurposing existing buildings we have in the case we need to move to something a little bit larger down the road. So lots of moving pieces, but well-coordinated team, everybody, all hands on deck here. So appreciate the support of everybody on campus.
Dr. Davies, how about academic affairs at the Med Center?
So thank you, Chancellor. So just like you know, we've been having leadership meetings for about 2 months, working with our deans, our directors, a lot of senior faculty and administrators in all the different colleges, and I can say that everybody's really pulled together very nicely. Our IT team has also been outstanding. Just like UNO, we also have a Keep Teaching site, and we have a Keep Learning site. Turn it on. Oh. It's on. It is on. Can you hear me? Okay. So we also have a Keep Learning site where we put a lot of tools for our students where they can learn. There's been a lot of hard work within the colleges to try and also understand, especially because we are professional students, we have to work closely not just with our own colleagues on campus, but also with the different accrediting agencies and sort of balance the need to make sure that our students keep learning and make sure that they get accredited with the need to also keep them safe. So a lot of hard work going on, a lot of daily meetings with the deans and directors to make sure that we're not missing anything, and also thinking about students who are away on rotations right now, that when they come back, they can safely come back, and those that need to self-quarantine or self-isolate, depending on how symptomatic they are, do that before they come back on campus.
Well, thank you, Dele. I really appreciate it. So I'd now like to introduce to you Dr. Chris Kratochvil. Chris has many different titles, but he's one of the executive directors of the Global Center for Health Security and also a mental health professional. Thank you very much for that. It's been helpful on many occasions. Chris, do you have some thoughts you might want to share with our campuses here in Omaha?
Certainly, thank you, Chancellor. One of the benefits we have of living really in this community is it has been a community of preparedness. And if you look back 15 years ago, Dr. Phil Smith had the vision to create the Clinical Biocontainment Unit, which just had its 15-year birthday this last week. And since that time, that preparedness mindset has continued. When H1N1 hit, we had pandemic preparedness, which has been incredibly robust. And that pandemic preparedness has continued on. And even as recently as 6 months ago, Shelley Schwedhelm helped lead the updating of that, making sure campus-wide we were ready. And again, that has really helped prepare us for where we are now. As far as the Global Center for Health Security, which was created a few years ago, 2 years ago, we really took the idea that preparing for disease X, an unknown new outbreak, was what ought to be our guiding light. So as we've been doing that over the last few years, we didn't know it, but we really were preparing for coronavirus. And over the last few months, we've really been taking those 3 pillars of an academic health center, clinical care, teaching, and research, and applying it to this venue. And it's hard to believe it was just December 30th of 2019 the first case was diagnosed. But since that time, we've been revving things up. So as the Chancellor mentioned, as far as a clinical perspective, we have helped support Americans repatriated from Wuhan, China, from cruise ships. We've activated not only partnering with the GUARD unit, but also our brand new federal quarantine unit here in the Davis Global Center, as well as our team activating the Clinical Biocontainment Unit. From a training perspective, we've been actively working with individuals who, with the federal government, other academic health centers, and folks on our campus with training and education. And from a research perspective, we've been able to launch a laboratory diagnostic resource to help diagnose individuals with coronavirus to augment the CDC testing. We've been doing active research with, as the Chancellor mentioned, remdesivir in being the first site to launch an NIH clinical trial. Under Dr. John Lowe and Dr. Josh Santarpia, we've been able to do some environmental research, helping to look at how does coronavirus spread. And as we have our quarantine unit with individuals who are sick, we can actually test the environment to learn from it. So really, we as an academic health center have been able to step up in a multitude of ways to very aggressively and assertively address this pandemic outbreak.
Thank you, Chris. So in summary, I would say that we have been preparing for this for a long time. The pandemic work exercises done at the Med Center have been widely shared, but most importantly, from an academic perspective, from an environmental services perspective, from a student services perspective, we have been earnestly working on this both at UNO and UNMC and working very well together, by the way, with our communications teams, etc., since early January, when we started to see the rapid rate of change of what was going on in China, hoping for the best but planning for the worst, that we would be totally prepared with a very well thought through plan as to what each of these steps would be. And as I stand here today, I can guarantee you that not every decision is going to be a great decision, but we're going to do our best, and that if we take a small step in one direction or another and we need to rethink it, we will do that. It's not to say that we aren't making rapid decisions in a very thoughtful and careful way, but there are just so many aspects of this, and the implications of this disease spread are so dynamic across our communities that we're trying very hard to stay at least one step ahead. So I do have some other thoughts, but I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and we're going to have some questions.
Thank you, Chancellor. So our first question is at the macro level. It comes with a lot of pride in what both UNO and UNMC are doing, and the question is this. when we speak with politicians and federal officials in Washington, what questions are they asking you, and what are they asking of us? And what are you urging them to do, and what are you asking from them to help us do our jobs more effectively?
Sure, that's a great question. Well, these conversations at the various highest levels of our colleagues in Washington go on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, the leadership of the Global Center, myself, I'm in constant contact with the major federal agencies at the level of the secretary and the undersecretary. I spent half a day in the White House last week. There's just an endless dialogue of what we can do for them in terms of advice and guidance that they're looking to our scientists for. I actually have a little show and tell item here. This is, in case you've never seen it, this is a CDC test kit. This is a bit of a point of pride for us because, as some of the audience may know, the first version of these test kits was not fully effective, and that was actually determined in our research laboratories and our testing centers, and that we worked very closely with CDC in order to make that change occur. But much more to the point of the questioner, Dan, is what are we asking for? Well, we're asking for a bunch of things. We're certainly asking for resources, personal protective equipment, testing kits, and things of that nature. We're asking for investments in our healthcare systems. We're asking for clear and consistent policy. Of course, we're always asking for resources. We're asking also for transparency whenever we can get it. At least I can tell you that we are committed here to be totally transparent and to continue to work with the local media, the national media, use our own internal communications tools for our faculty, for our staff, for our students, to tell you what we know and what we don't know, and just to be very thoughtful about how we share that. I think that the colleagues that we work with so closely at the leadership of the federal agencies, and I'm talking about at the very, very top of the federal agencies, my experience has been that they work very hard. They work in 22-hour days, most of them, if not more. They communicate as effectively as they can with us and with others, and they're dealing with a situation that is very hard to deal with and very hard to predict. I'll also add that at early stages of this, there was a clear concept that it would be very unlikely that this virus would ever spread out of China, and that a lot of the preparedness was either inaccurate or hyped by the media unnecessarily. I would say that the experiences that we've had in New York, in California, in Washington State, watching what's going on in Western Europe, now with reporting of cases not only of confirmed members of the United States Congress, major athletes, and others, it's convinced the world and convinced our nation that this is super real. And they're watching what's going on with the financial markets, and that all adds up to what can we do about it? How can we protect our families? What do we need to know? What are the trusted sources of information? So I take that all as an extremely positive feature. So Dan, are there other questions? I see there are quite a few coming in online.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a good one for both campuses.
Mm-hmm.
What do we think we're going to do for commencement? Are we going to have commencement? Is it going to be postponed? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll start off and simply say it's not going to look like it's traditionally looked like on campuses. But why don't we start with Sacha, and maybe you can share what some of our preliminary thinking is, and then we'll switch over to Dele and share some of the same thoughts. Again, all of this is a work in progress. And by the way, I know there's a meeting on Monday that we're scheduled to have to talk about some of the big thoughts. But what do you think?
Thank you. Like everything in the last 2 months, we're really grateful for all these questions because they help us envision the next step and think through all the things that are coming along as we move to remote operations like this. We're committed to commencement. We're committed to celebrating our students' achievements. We're committed to celebrating the UNO community, so we will definitely have a commencement in the likely event that it has to be a remote commencement. We will try to assemble a team together in these next days to talk about a combination of recorded events around our campus and celebration of individual student achievement, together with a televised event like what we're talking about right now here in this forum, where we're able to speak in real time to the UNO community. So that's going to be something we'll try to have nailed down in the next week or so.
Yeah, and it's not just commencement, right? There are all sorts of honors celebrations,
Absolutely.
faculty recognitions, alumni recognitions, and so we're going to find a forum, a series of different looking opportunities to do that. And I know there's a good deal of work that's going on in this thought process as well here at the Med Center. And Dele, maybe you'd comment on some of those?
Yes, Tito. So we are also very committed to making sure that we celebrate our students' accomplishments through commencement and through the individual convocation ceremonies that occur every year. Just like UNO, we're also looking at possible virtual ways that we can do this if for whatever reason we remain in the current status that we're in. And so we're thinking about some very innovative ways that we could make sure that we do these celebrations. And we have committees beginning to look at those ideas, including the use of the Davies Global Center to do something really unique. So we're brainstorming on this right now. If you have ideas, we'd love to hear them. But we're certainly beginning the process of thinking about what we can do outside the box.
Great. So more to come. I would like to hope that by maybe the end of next week, we have some firmer thoughts that we can start to share. But again, as Dr. Davies said, if any of you in the audience have some really great ideas as to how we can do this, send them on in. We'd love to hear from you. Dan, we have other questions? I'm sure we do.
Absolutely, we do. We have a lot coming in. So this is a good question. It pertains perhaps to both campuses. What are we doing for students that are internet insecure, meaning they don't have reliable access to internet maybe at home?
Yeah,
sure. So on our campus, we quickly recognize that this will be an essential issue. There are a couple of steps that we've taken. We've aggregated all of the laptops and portable devices that we could across the campus. So that's a combination of teaching labs that had laptops, or our library resources, or our information technology team. And we had about 200 laptops that we pulled together that students could check out. In fact, that's happening already in our Epley building on the UNO campus. Students were invited at the time that the Chancellor announced that we'd be doing remote teaching and learning to go directly to a link, and they could sign themselves up for a device. In addition, the campus remains open. There are a number of buildings with Wi-Fi connectivity that the students who do not have internet access at home can come into.
Including the library, right?
Including the library, including our student center, including Mammal Hall, the Peter Kiewit Institute. There are a number of buildings around campus that we are going to be publicizing where students can be distant from one another and yet able to sit and work or attend their classes. And finally, for students who find it difficult to come to campus during this time, the IT group has also purchased a number of these little personal Wi-Fi hotspots that one can take with them and then have access to internet from wherever they are here in the region. So we're really working to make this kind of accessibility a possibility for everyone, and students can still sign up if they have not done so, and we'll continue to work to provide access for students who have difficulty at home.
Dr. Davies?
So
more of the same, right?
Yeah, pretty much the same. We've also directed all our students to talk to their different colleges to ensure that each one of them has access to the appropriate equipment that they need. Computers, I have a big signal. Computers and other equipment they may need. Also, for those who have issues with internet, we have opportunities for them to come on campus and access whatever Wi-Fi or other methods they need to access.
And there was a recent announcement that one of the major Wi-Fi providers in the city was going to be providing deeply discounted Wi-Fi to students who are involved with remote education and distance education for a period of time, at least through the end of the semester. And our goals are, of course, to make sure that every single student can continue on their academic journey in an uninterrupted way. Dr. Shipp, other questions?
This might be a question for Vice Chancellor Ewald. Are there any specific instructions for students seeking refunds for parking, housing, dining. You mentioned that earlier. What are we sharing with our students?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. There is, other than checking out of their dorm where they're housing today, there is no specific action that needs to be taken by students. So we will take the housing data that we accumulate from our housing folks, and pair that up with our parking data, and we'll place that on the student accounts or issue the refunds from that perspective. There's no action item other than the checkout that is required on behalf of the students. And from a parking perspective, I saw one question roll in here. We're open campus right now at UNO in particular, so there's no requirements on where you park from that standpoint. We have very few cars on campus, so park between the lines, but
Yeah, please park between the lines.
Yeah,
That's always
please.
good advice.
Please park between the lines, and other than that, we're open campus.
Thank you.
Okay, here's another one. So maybe both for Dr. Kopp and Dr. Davies, what are we doing to support the mental health of students at this critical time?
Yeah, Sacha, maybe you'd start.
Sure. Students should always know that our counseling and mental health services remain open, and students can access that now online as a preferred option. Assistant Vice Chancellor Kathleen Pettit is our Dean of Students and herself a licensed counselor, so she remains open to students and available. So I urge students who are seeking, who need help, to seek it from us. All of our academic advisors are available to talk about more academic matters, but we want to start with your health and wellness and make sure that you seek help where we can. So please let us know how we can help you.
So the same thing at UNMC, Dr. Steve Wengel and Dr. Carver have made themselves available to any student who has any issues or concerns, or faculty or staff as well. And we recognize that this is a really time of intense tension for a lot of people. In particular, we've met with our international students, and we're aware that some of you have some concerns related to what's going on both locally and internationally. And we continue to be available, both myself, Dr. Meza, and of course, Drs. Wengel and Carver, to continue to address any concerns you may have, as are your deans as well, and program directors.
So I understand, Dele, that we're going to be doing a wellness town hall meeting early next week for our students. Is that right?
That is correct. There's a town hall meeting that's being put on by a student services group, and we encourage all students to dial in and to check in if you have any specific questions.
Dr. Shipp, do you want to add to that? You are obviously very, very involved in the planning around student health and wellness, and maybe you could talk about our student health center services and the wellness programs just for a minute.
It is, and so on both campuses, we'll actually have a wellness webinar, and so UNO is putting finishing details together for that. But I think it really goes to how we're supporting students remotely, and we're in upwards of 50 to 60 requests that we get daily on either campus that come into our counseling teams, and our appointments are full. So students are finding their way to our services and our staff, and we're looking for new creative ways to reach out with how do I handle this remotely at home? One of the questions that just came in that I would share, and maybe you would have some thoughts on, is how do I begin to balance my life at home with, you're asking me to learn remotely, but I also have family in the house, I have kids and pets. How am I going to work through that? And what are kind of some of the tips that maybe some of us are dealing with ourselves?
We did a television broadcast earlier this week with Dr. Wengel, and he was asked that question from a call-in viewer. And he made what I thought was a really good suggestion. And he said, write a schedule. These days can be long and very complex, but if you write a schedule of things that you want to do and that you need to do, whether it's your studies, whether it's work from home, food preparation, hopefully a little exercise is a good thing, maybe some meditation and mindfulness is a good thing as well. But write it down. And I thought that was a really, really good thing to do. I'm very fortunate that I've got a whole group of people who write down my schedule every day. I even get periodically to have some input into it. But it's very calming to be able to do that. Did you want to add, Dele, to that?
Yes, I just want to say that for some students, we also recognize that this is really difficult to do at home every single day. So we ask that you contact your dean or your academic associate dean to see if there's a time you can come in to campus. As we say, we're not closed. So there might be times when you feel it's just okay to come in here for an hour or two just to be focused and maybe get stuff done before you go back home. So we just want to remind everyone that, that for those of you who really find it hard to do everything you need to get done at home, come on campus and, make sure you let us know that you're coming so that you're not all coming together in the same room. But, we're very expecting some of you to come on and hope that you will take advantage of that.
Dr. Shipp.
Okay, next question comes from a faculty member. So I'm working hard to revise my curriculum. I'm a little nervous about doing it well. Maybe what are some words of advice that you can give me? Because no different than students, I'm trying to figure out how to do this well myself.
That would be a really good opportunity for me to interject how proud I am of our faculty and staff for the incredible amount of work that they are doing in order to make this transition. There's been just a huge effort, a willingness to just roll up our sleeves, to roll up their sleeves, to try to not only just get it done, but to get it done right, so the quality of the educational product doesn't interrupt the journey of any of our students. And I've had an opportunity to speak to a lot of members of the faculty over the last several weeks, and they're all of an attitude, just like this questioner is, Dan, how can I do the very best that I can do? And we have tremendous resources on both campuses to do that. And so I'm going to take it from the position, just to begin with, from an IT technology point of view. And we are reassured that the technology, be it Zoom, be it Canvas, whatever it is more than enough robust to do what we need to do. But how do we answer those faculty questions, Sacha?
Well, in terms of getting help and making sure that we have all the resources available, there's lots of options. I would start with our IT learning group. They've been absolutely fantastic. Assistant Vice President Jackie Lindbergh and her team have just been at the top of all of this and really proactive in responding to faculty questions. So I urge faculty with questions to reach out to them directly, and they've been deep into helping with each and every course that they hear about. I also know that every college on our campus has a team that has been involved in instructional technology and very helpful to faculty within the college. And I've seen lots of examples of faculty working with each other, because some faculty have been further into this process for months and years than others. And so I know that I've seen lots of examples of faculty sharing with each other really great ideas. And I'll just emphasize that this is an opportunity to think outside the box. There are still faculty who are planning to hold student juried recitals. It's just that we will do social distancing, and we can have a student standing on stage performing while faculty are out in the audience socially distanced from one another. So it's not that we're all online, it's that we're trying to achieve remote instruction through all means available. The last thing I would really just offer as a piece of personal advice is to rethink assessment, because that often seems the common refrain of everything that's come up of the most challenging things, whether it's exams or papers or music lessons. It's the assessment factor, and anything we can do to rethink that during this time is a really creative opportunity that might actually serve us well going forward, just to think differently than old-fashioned exams.
One of the questions that just came up online was, is this the time to go to a totally pass-fail system? We leave that discussion and that discretion to the faculty. I mean, they need to make that decision on a class-by-class and semester-by-semester basis. It's not an unreasonable suggestion, but it's one that has to be consistent with what the academic journey is. Dele, thoughts on that?
So again, just like UNO, I want to commend our IT group led by Melissa Deers. They've done a yeoman's job in putting together resources. Again, we have a KIPP teaching site that I encourage all our faculty to log on to. If you're not sure where to find it, just go to the UNMC coronavirus page, and you should be able to track it through that page. The other thing that I want to say is that in addition to the KIPP teaching, which has all the tools that you can use like Echo, 360, Zoom, Canvas, etc., our faculty development team has also put together resources on how to teach. And some of that information is up, others will be up today. And we're also adding information every day. So just keep checking. Plus, our IT team is setting up virtual webinars that you can look out for and sign into to help train those who don't have a lot of expertise in teaching. And finally, just like Dr. Kopp mentioned, we have several colleges that have had a lot of experience in online teaching, like Public Health College and nursing and some of our allied health colleges. I encourage you to seek out faculty within those colleges who can actually help you if you're someone who has never had the opportunity to do this before.
And they're more than willing to help, right?
Correct.
Sasha?
So maybe offer one more thought as all of us as faculty are thinking about how to move instruction in this new era. One of the things I'm so proud to see our faculty already doing is doing their outreach to students differently. It's so easy when we're walking the halls, we can bump into our students and have a conversation with them and maintain those relationships outside the classroom that make the learning environment so much more satisfactory for everyone. But a lot of our faculty are already thinking ahead and looking at how do I message my students, how do I make myself available to students as office hours over Zoom, how do I put a little bit of humor and a little bit of encouragement to our students out there. And so I just urge us to think, in addition to the content, to take the example of a lot of our faculty colleagues who are already doing this, is how do I maintain the connectivity? Because even as we are socially distancing ourselves, we still, I guess I put it in the words of our faculty senate president, although we're doing social distancing, we want to be socially distancing and maintain the relationships that have made the UNO community special.
And Chancellor, something that I hear from you a lot is around the topic of grace and grit, and it really, it comes to what we've talked about here. There are going to be times when we just step in it, right? But we're all trying to give each other a little space to be imperfect as we work through this together. I think those words are really critical for the community to hear.
So I think we have time for one more question. Do you have one, Dan?
I do. I do. So this gets into, and Doug, this might be for you, talk about the 80-hour emergency leave that's available. Is it to be used only for this time related to coronavirus, or could it be used multiple times?
Yeah, good question, Dan. In a memo from President Carter to all the chancellors last Saturday, which I think went out on Monday, and I'm going to read a couple things here just to be perfectly clear with everybody that
Sure.
Every University of Nebraska employee, that includes full-time, part-time, temporary workers, student workers, may take up to 80 hours of administrative leave in the event of self-quarantine, quarantine or care of immediate family member, child care resulting from school closures, and other related scenarios. I think the first three are pretty clear. The other related scenarios, the fourth one is I would encourage people to work with their supervisor, work with their manager. We're going to err on the side of, as we mentioned, a little bit of grace from that standpoint, but we don't want people just not calling in, not showing up. Have the communication, please, with your supervisor, with your manager. Open your MAV daily and your Today at UNMC, your browser every day. It's first and foremost at the top of the page out there every day with respect to different things that we're putting out there. That's always being refreshed. So I encourage everybody to step out and look at all the resources that are available to you. But this particular leave program is significant for us, and we really appreciate the president putting it out there and people acting accordingly with this.
There was one last question that kind of ties into that. Doug
Sure.
came in, so this is our double word score for questions. They asked a question about the food pantry. So if I'm experiencing, an insecurity, what options do we have?
A lot of people are concerned about that.
Yeah.
Doug, do you want to comment?
Absolutely, and we've worked with Dan Shopp at UNO, the student success people. There's a building that's in the CEC building today, and we've put the gates up permanently on that. We don't want anybody walking into the pantry, but we're going to box stuff up for the pantry if there are people who are insecure or whatever. All you have to do is drive through the gates. Dan's going to have people there manning that to hand out boxes of food for people, so greatly appreciate that. Donations are always absolutely welcome. That's probably one of the biggest things we can do right now. to keep that population addressing we can address their needs, but Student Success has done a nice job of making sure that that is open and up and running, and we're going to make it as convenient as possible for people to get in and out without having to walk into a facility.
And all of this will be updated on Monday, but if you're in self-quarantine, we also have delivery options too. So I think that's just a real great effort for the campus. And that includes both faculty, staff, students at UNO and UNMC.
Super. So we do have a number of questions that we have online that we have not had time to fully explore, and we will get them shared and get the answers up on our webpage as quickly as possible. But I did want to just take a minute and tell you a little story. As some of you may know, last weekend I had an opportunity to FaceTime with my grandchildren. I have twin 3.5-year-old grandchildren, a little boy and a little girl. And the purpose of it is I do FaceTime with them frequently, as you might imagine. I love to read them bedtime stories and things of that nature because they live in another city. But this was a very different kind of call. This was, Grandpa, what's going on? Why can't I go to school on Monday? Why can't I have play dates the way I usually have them? Grandpa, why is the library closed? And, you know, I'd love to go to the museums. Why can't I do that? And it was a really very heartfelt moment to try to explain this to these amazing young children. Of course, I think, you know, I'm like Lake Wobegon, where all of my children and grandchildren are above average. But I thought they were really very powerful questions coming from very trusting and you know, obviously young and thought-provoking in many ways. So I started off to talk to them about good germs and bad germs, and you know, try to give them as much information as I possibly could. I didn't quite get into the zoonotic, RNA, sloppy replicating coronavirus families. We did talk a little bit about bat caves and pangolas and other such things, and they'd already looked up what a pangolin looks like, and they knew more about the pangolas than I did. But at the end of the conversation, it got really serious, and you know, the little girl said to me, "Well, Grandpa, what is this going to really mean to us?" And I just spent a few minutes talking with them about how much their family cares about them and loves them, and about the fact that everybody was going to do their very best to protect them, and that we really didn't know how long they were going to be out of school, and we really didn't understand when their next play date was going to be. But we knew for sure that we were going to keep them comfortable, protected to the best of their parents' abilities, assuming it doesn't drive them crazy, keep them engaged, and that we would just continue to provide as much useful information as they wanted, and they should feel perfectly free to FaceTime me or any of their other grandparents or at any time to ask any of those questions. And then there was a pause, and the little boy looked at me and said, "Okay, Grandpa." And then we started to talk about cookies and ice cream, and they were actually baking at the moment. And so it seemed like a good thing to sort of do on a cold, wintry day. And I share the story with you because it's not just our students and our faculty and our staff who are insecure and uncertain and facing a complex future. We are in unprecedented times here, and we need to do our very best to communicate effectively, to be available to all of you, to share the good news and the bad news, to reassure you that we're not only planning on a day-by-day basis, but we're planning for weeks and months ahead. We're looking at transformation. We're looking at opportunities to really make this a learning institution, a research institution, and a clinically engaged institution of the future, and to learn everything we can from these experiences to do our job better and better every day. And I hope when this is all over, you too will have the feeling that it's okay, Grandpa. So I thank you for joining us today. I'm really honored to be with you. We will do our best to answer all of your questions, and we'll continue communicating to the very best of our ability. Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend. Be safe.